By the way, I like things to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions, challenge me on any point at any time. You can either unmute yourself or put something in the chat box. And because this is for you. So Ryan had graduated from a top school. He was a chemistry major, really wanted to go work in a lab, but he hadn't kept his GPA up that high. You know, he was doing other things in college. And his father reached out to me when he'd gone through the summer and the early fall and hadn't been able to land anything. So I worked with him on what his message was, what he could present, how he could get around this issue he had that you couldn't show a GPA on his resume because it wouldn't impress anyone. And basically, we ended up tapping largely into his alumni network. First person he reached out to was the CEO of a biotech firm who said, "Yeah, hey, come on, if you want to come up to Boston, I will give you a tour of the facility. I'll introduce you to our head of HR." Within a couple months, he had landed a role in a lab doing exactly what he wanted to do. And he's had 3 promotions in the first few years since then. So I'm hoping to share with you today some of the secrets that help Ryan successfully land. So the first secret is you have to have a focused target. Now, if you don't have a goal, any path will take you there. And if you think about job search, think about niche marketing. The more niched you are, the more you attract things. Now, you know, there are 3, if you think of the 3-legged stool, where one is your passions, one is your skills, and one is your life goals. Obviously, the sweet spot is here in the center where they all overlap. But let me ask you, do you think any of these are more important than the others? Is there a starting place you should go in your search, or are they all equally important? What do you think? Anyone want to venture a thought?
I would think that skills would be a huge piece to look at, and sort of balancing what skills do I bring in and what skills would I like to improve starting
Okay.
off.
So we have one vote for skills.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with that. I do think that they are all very valuable, but I've learned that just from osmosis, that if you don't have the hard skills to do the job, then soft skills, even though they're very important and are what get you the job, they can't compensate for not being able to do the thing that you need to do.
That's true. You do have to have some. You have to have some innate ability. Or it will be a bad fit. Well, I will tell you my perspective from working on this with people for the last 2 decades. I think that absolutely passions, rules, tempered by the skills that you have and tempered by the life goals. Because what I see happening all the time is I'll meet someone who they went into iBanking because investment bankers make a lot of money. They went to law school because, once you have a law degree, you're set for life. They went into medicine because grandma always wanted a doctor in the family, but it's not their passion. And I run into them 5 years down the road. They are really unhappy and they feel trapped. They don't know how to pivot. And that happens a lot when you start from the life goals, because you filter what you're looking at by the goals that you have. And if you focus first on the skills, yes, you do want to have a certain level of skill for what you're doing. But again, it can end up being too much of a filter. If you start from what is it I really want to do, and then what skills do I have to support this? What skills do I need to develop additionally? Or how can I do it in a way that really aligns with my skills? And then figure out how do I do it to satisfy my life goals as well. You'll have, in my view, a much more successful approach, because also what people will see is that you're passionate about what you're going after, which will engage them much more to be willing to take you on and give you a chance. My own practice is a good example that, I'd been an actuary for many years, and I just reached a point where that wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. It was great for a while, but it just had reached a point that I needed to change. I ended up, I actually had a consulting practice for 5 years, but I was doing job search as a hobby, helping people with that. And it kept calling me. And I finally said, okay, it's starting over, but it's what I really want to do. I really know I'm good at this. I can do it. I can, there's some additional skills I may need to develop in coaching and marketing and so on, but I can do that. And then it was, how do I do it to satisfy the fact that we have a car, we have a mortgage, we have kids who are about to go to college soon, and we're going to have to fund that. So I figured out how to do it to make all that happen. So if you're struggling with figuring out where those passions and skills align, I think there are three main approaches you can take. But you can ask yourself some of these questions. First, when have you been most satisfied on the job? Whether it was a summer job, an internship, what were you doing when you felt really good about what you were doing? What types of projects most excite you, get you saying, I'm going to stay up all night to work on this? When have you felt the most productive? And what classes or assignments really got you excited? Like my daughter, in high school, she took a psychology class. She loved the teacher. She loved what she was teaching her. And she would stay up all night to do an assignment way beyond what was required because she loved doing it. And that teacher became a mentor to her. She ended up actually going to the school that she graduated from. And her first year out of school looking for a teaching job, she ended up getting hired as a full year leave replacement teaching AP psychology. So when you pursue what you're really excited about, it's very powerful. And then you can also look at the reverse side. When was I least happy? What did I find really boring? What did I not like at all? Because those are things you want to avoid. In fact, Barbara Scher has written some good books on finding your North Star. And one of the exercises she promotes is write the job description for your job from hell, because that usually unlocks the creative juices. You write down everything, and then you say, when you're all done, what can I do to flip it on its head? What does that point me? So as I was saying, there are three main ways that I think are really powerful for uncovering this. One is kind of the thoughtful approach. I do a lot of assessments. I go to the career counselors. I go to the college placement office, and they'll do a lot of assessments and work with me. And that can be very valuable, particularly if I'm blocked on figuring out where things align, what are possible areas to pursue. There's a self-guided approach. What Color is Your Parachute is still a great book. Dick Bowles died a few years ago, but I had multiple editions of his book because he'd written a new edition every year from the 70s on, and it's still a great book to work through. And then there's what I call the active approach, which is what I tried to do with Ryan that I mentioned before, the feedback loop, where you get your message and you get in front of people so that you get practice presenting your message, getting sharper, and at the same time you're tuning people to help you get where you want to go. So now sit down and really try to come up with what is your dream job scorecard. Get as specific as you can. What's the industry? What's the role? What's the level, the title, the duties, the responsibilities? What types of projects do you most like to work on? What boss and management style brings out your best? What company and organization would you want to be in? What does it do? What sort is it a profit? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a government agency? Is it an NGO? What types of products or services does it offer? How big is it? And more important than the size is, what is it about that size that attracts you? Because there are different attributes that come with that, different opportunities. What sort of company culture would be the best for you? Do you like to be very independent on your own? Do you want to be hybrid? Do you want to not have to go into the office? Do you want a really collaborative operation? Do you want to be in a lot of meetings where you're really working with other people all the time? Are there any specific companies that you've identified that are interesting to you? And what is it specifically about those companies that attracts you? And then once you've got this down, now go and think about compensation. What do you need or want? And then you can go out and do some research into what jobs like that pay and see if that means that you need to adjust some of this to get you to where you want to be. Now, I'm not saying, there is only one specific place, one specific direction you could go. I mean, you're probably going to change careers multiple times. I mean, this is my third career, and they've all been really good ones. But so you don't need to put the pressure on. What is the thing that will be the one thing I'm going to do for the next 30 years? Look at what's something that'd be really good for the next few years. And maybe I'll be so excited that I just keep on that track and I keep going in that direction for a long time. Maybe I'll pivot at that point. But you want it to come through that you are really passionate about the direction you are in. And so you pick something that could be really good for the near term. Now, on the other side of the equation, I was a hiring manager I did all of the actuarial hiring for my company for 13 years. I ran the actuarial department. Well, if you're not focused, don't waste my time. You get a lot of people coming in for interviews. Sometimes they come in and they're kind of a blank slate. Well, he's going to tell me everything about the job. I don't need to do any research. I don't need to prepare. Yeah, that's going to that's not going to serve you well. But also what happens, and a lot of people get counseled to do this. Oh, first questions you should ask is, what would be the ideal candidate for this job? What qualities are you looking for from this person? What are you looking for them to do? Well, what happens is this is kind of what I call the job search shuffle. I'm trying hard to do this dance to not tell you what I'm about and what I really want until you give me the answers to the test. And I know, as a hiring manager, I know you're doing that. I know you're asking for the answers to the test. And if I give them to you and you say, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I'm about, that's exactly what I want, I don't believe you because I gave you the answers and you're just mimicking them back. So it's much more powerful if you put a stake in the ground and you tell me, this is what I'm really excited about. This is what I'd love to be doing. This is the sort of place I'd want to be. Maybe it's not exactly what I have, but I believe you. You've built a lot of credibility with me. We've built a relationship. And if this isn't the right fit, I may refer you to another part of the company or someone else I know where it might be the right fit. I had someone who came in for an interview. I was hiring for actually an officer level role. And 15 minutes in the interview, the person said, I don't think this is the right job for me. I didn't throw him out of my office. We had a conversation about what he was really looking for. I was very impressed with him. And at the end of the day, I sat down with my boss and came up with the highest offer I felt I could afford to try to attract him to my operation because I believed him. I thought he would add so much to the operation. So to summarize, the first secret is about having a really focused target, creating that personal scorecard to focus your search. But most importantly, get off the bench, get out there talking to people, get in front of people, get your message in front of people, practice it. so that you're not just sitting back thinking too long. So the second secret is you need to tell powerful stories. And this can be a challenge when you're very early in your career because you're saying, well, I don't have that many things I've done. I don't have that many stories I can tell. Well, you gotta find a way to do that because stories are what really engage people. Now, let me ask you, why do you think stories are critical? I'm sure Ken has some real thoughts on that, and probably Carol as well. But
Everybody loves a good story, John. Since we were kids, we love
mhm.
great stories, and they're interesting, compelling, memorable.
Yep, they
Way to
make
go.
they make you stand out. Yep.
As a
Okay, but
creative writing minor, I know that telling stories and whatnot is kind of one of the main tools for communicating or communicating anything complex since like practically the dawn of language, the dawn of our existence. So it's a
right.
very established avenue for explaining things that aren't necessarily as simple as there's a thing over the hill over there.
Yep. That's why the analogy and the metaphor are so powerful. You know, I can tell you this thing, or I can tell you a story that helps you understand it and see it. And stories are what connect you with someone on an emotional level. And in a job interview, a networking situation, the rapport is very important. And they show that you can communicate. I mean, I'm getting a live example of the way you communicate by the stories you tell. And I'm like, oh, if they're engaging, if I like them, I'm like, well, I want more of this. I want more of this on my team. I used to run a networking group that I took over from someone. He was a project manager at AT&T, and I used to go and speak for his group a lot. And he asked me to take it over when he left. And he was a great storyteller. He could tell you, and he'd tell long stories, but they were so engaging that you just wanted more and more. And he used to say that, hey, you can send me a cover letter. I don't care if it's 15 pages long, as long as every single paragraph leaves me wanting to know more. And stories do that. They leaves the person wanting to know more. And they're unique to you. Other people may have done similar things to what you did, may have had projects similar to yours, but they don't have your exact story. So these are the way you create your unique value proposition. They show how you think and act in different situations. And most importantly, overall, they prove your point, but they prove it with engagement. So I'll give you an example. This is from someone who wanted to be a teacher. And this was the story that she told in her cover letters and when she talked to people. I knew from an early age that I wanted to pursue a career in education. I had a play classroom in my home where my mom would find me conducting classes to my dolls. Once I started school, I sought ways to participate more in the educational process. Over the summers, I went back to my second grade teacher's classroom to help her get it ready for the upcoming school year. I worked at the middle school and high school orientations to help students adjust to a new school. In high school, I worked weekly at the Hispanic Homework Help Program to help ESL students advance. When the public school district stopped supporting the program, I was one of the only tutors who continued the program outside of the school through the public library. I worked after school in the middle school tutoring program, helping students study for tests, write papers, and do homework. Over winter break, I spent a day in a first grade classroom observing and helping the teacher with activities. I have expertise working with students from a diverse set of backgrounds, from low income to high income, from special needs to ESL students. I've been told I have excellent leadership and organizational skills. I'll be a passionate, hardworking, enthusiastic teacher. I want to make a difference in children's lives in the same way my school changed my life. Isn't that the sort of person you would want to bring into your classroom? I mean, she's told a really engaging story about her passion and why this makes sense, why this direction makes sense. And it's not all just about teaching specifically, it's about the things that show that you will be a great teacher and a great mentor and engagement for the kids. Give you another so how do you express your value in stories? You want to get the listener to care. So, and this is my template for it. You'll hear a lot of templates. Career services might show you want PARs, CARs, STARs. This is my own variation on it: challenge, actions, and results for the employer. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by a story like this. I was only a junior in high school, and this is, again, it's a real story from someone I was talking to. I was only a junior in high school with limited computer expertise when the volunteer coordinator at the hospital asked if I could help redesign the database system for local clinics serving poor and disadvantaged families. I reviewed their system and discovered a horrible mess: an old database with outdated and duplicative information and a flawed user interface was hurting efficiency. So I had a three-person team of volunteers, and our first step was to inventory all the clinic's hardware. We then interviewed each doctor and nurse to see how they use the database and what would make their work more efficient. We then developed a new design and split up the work between us. The doctors and nurses at the clinic were ecstatic about the new system. The nurses no longer needed extensive system training that would take them away from more critical duties. The doctors could easily locate the children's records, so they no longer were bogged down by duplicate and irrelevant data. The patients benefited from simplified billing and reporting, and the project was so successful that it received a Junior Volunteer Award and scholarship. So if you can tell stories like this about what you've done, you're going to really engage people. And you notice that it did a good job of setting up what were the challenges I faced. I had limited computer expertise, and I'm asked to redesign this database. I have this horrible mess. It's outdated, duplicative. That really sets things up. So whatever result you achieve sounds that much more impressive because of the challenges you were faced with or had to overcome to get there. He didn't get bogged down in tons of detail about the actions, which is really the least important part of the story. That's the place where, when I said leave them wanting to know more, that's the place where you leave them wanting to know more. They say, well, tell me more about how you redesigned that database. Tell me more about what you did to figure out what could be done. And then he had some clear results and ones that were really a little bit emotional, that, what it did for the nurses, the doctors, the patients. So you want to have a quiverful of stories like this that you can draw on from anything you've done. And they don't have to be, this was a volunteer project. This wasn't something that he did for pay. So they don't have to be for pay. They can be volunteer initiatives. They can be things you did for your frat. They can be things you did on your own. But you need stories. So here's another one. As a student teaching intern, I was assigned a middle-of-the-road 10th grade class. They were chatty, easily excited, and tended to quickly devolve into joking around. How was I going to get them on task so they could actually master what I was supposed to be teaching? I tried various techniques. I set up a decibel reader to increase awareness of the noise level. I created a punishment and reward system based on that noise level. And that helped a lot. But then I hit on the best solution. I had timed lessons using a projected digital timer to pace the class and move it forward before distractions could set in. So not only did the class now stay on task, they ended up scoring in the top % within the entire district on the PARCC exam. So they went from middle of the road achievement to even exceeding some of the highest performing classes. This was someone who was trying to get his first teaching job. And this was what he'd done as a student intern in a school. So again, it's telling you a story that would engage you, that would show you, this is the sort of person that can help our students really succeed. So to summarize, the second secret is tell powerful stories, get employers to care about your accomplishments, and now go back and use that to evaluate your scorecard that we talked about in the first secret. Do a gap analysis. Do I have stories to back up all of the criteria that I'm going to need to sell myself on for this job? if I'm missing something, say this job requires negotiation. I don't have anything for negotiation. What do I do about that? Maybe I've got some things that are negotiation adjacent in my background that I just forgot to come up with a story for. Maybe I've never done negotiation, so I need to go get an expert book like Never Split the Difference and really pour through it. I need to take a course. I need to find a project where I can take on negotiation skills. Or if the gap is too big, it's clearly, there's no way I'm going to land the sort of job I really want. Well, what can I do to land something that's partway there and lets me fill in the gap? So in a couple of years, I can make the move to the thing I really want. So the third secret is you need to have an outstanding sales package. And I purposely call it a sales package because a job search is a marketing and sales campaign. And if you didn't sign up to be a marketing and salesperson, that can be a little intimidating because that's what you are. Now, that doesn't have to be sales doesn't have to be a dirty word. This doesn't mean you're trying to present something that you're not. You need to find a way to present what you have legitimately, that you present it real, but you've got to present it in the best light. So what are the critical marketing materials for a search? I'll throw out my list. Your resume. I mean, that's your sales brochure for your search. Or if you're going for a consulting role, there's a variation on it that I call an engagement bio. There's your LinkedIn profile. This is a primary job search networking tool. So you should have a strong LinkedIn profile that engages people, that you can point people to, because every employer is going to go and check for that. And if you don't have one, they're going to wonder why. If you have one that doesn't have a photo, they're going to wonder why. If you have one that's just not professional, they're going to be like, okay, I don't know if this person is the professional I thought they were. You need a way you approach cover letters that really makes them marketing letters, that engages people, that makes them want to know more, makes them want to read your resume, makes them want to have you come in and talk to them. You should have a business card. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be your name, your contact information, maybe a tagline about what you're seeking. That would be enough. But it'll make you look so much more professional and prepared when you're at some alumni function or networking function and someone says, well, hey, I'd love to stay in touch. Give me your card. When you're writing your information on the back of an envelope, you just look unprepared. And they're very inexpensive to get. You can even go to Vistaprint used to have a deal where you could just pay for shipping and handling and get a set of 250. I don't know what their current deal is, but you can get business cards with little effort. And then think about your email address. Make sure it doesn't have to be fancy, but make sure it's not something unprofessional or that's communicating something that maybe creates a little bias in someone's mind. And make sure use your signature, your email signature, to communicate what you're about. And then depending on what you're going after, like if you were going after a role that involved writing, you might want a portfolio of sample writing that you've done in different venues. So let's take apart the resume for a few minutes, as that is the core sales brochure for your search. So you want to think like a hiring manager. And in my years as a hiring manager, I boiled it down to 3 questions that you have to answer to get my attention with your resume. First is, does it have a strong professional image? This doesn't mean it has to be on scented paper, colored paper, fancy fonts. It just needs to look professional. It needs to pass the 10-second test. And it needs to prove you will deliver. So the professional image is about answering 2 questions. Showing that you care about your work and showing that you're capable of producing professional work. Because if you fail either of those, I'm now worried about the work you are going to do for me. If you don't care enough to make your resume look professional, why should I believe you're going to care enough to make your regular work look professional? Or if you're not capable of making it look professional, well, now I'm really worried about what your regular work is going to be like. Now, I once had he was an summer intern, and he literally could not. This was in my actuarial days where we're dealing with numbers all the time. He literally could not write a set of numbers in a straight line and add them up. It was like everything he handed me was hard to follow, hard to read. It was terrible. So now the 10-second test, this has to do with the screening process. You know, a recruiter, a staffing agency, an HR group, they've got a stack like this of resumes for any job. And they do not have time to read in detail everything that's there. They're taking a quick look. First, they're seeing, does it look professional? And then they're reading enough to get a sense of, is it worth investing the time to read further? And they're quickly getting through. And if you don't pass that 10-second test, they're not coming back to you, because by the time they get to the bottom of the stack, they'll have found the handful that they're willing to pass on to the hiring manager for possible interviews, and they don't have the time to go back. So this is about your messaging right up front that grabs my attention and tells me, yeah, I want to know more about this person. So let me give you an example of this is the bad example. This is what I mentioned Ryan. Obviously, I've changed the name, but I mentioned Ryan before. This was what was on the resume he sent me. Objective: to pursue an associate chemist position in a pharmaceutical services lab using analytical and problem-solving skills. Tells me nothing. It just tells, and it's all about him. It's not about me, what I want. It's about him, what he wants. So we went through, figured out what he really brought to the table, and here was what we came up with. A summary of qualifications: in-depth undergraduate chemistry research, graduate level chemistry research into drug precursors, frequently presented within lab and at conferences, aptitude for writing scientific reports, recognized for analytical and problem-solving skills, held leadership roles within multiple student organizations, and then had a quick list of some of the key areas of expertise that might be relevant to a hiring manager. Now, if I see this, it gives me right away a sense of, this is the sort of package I might be interested in. I should read further, or I should call him up and have him come in for an interview. And then finally, you pass the first two tests. You still need to prove you will deliver. Every single point in your resume needs to present the results that you've achieved, because that's what I'm looking for. That's why I hire. So every point should demonstrate results. For example, so it's, for those of you who are just starting out, what might you say about having been an officer of a fraternity? Well, being an officer by itself, okay, that's something, because you've got an officer level position. But even if you hadn't been an officer, but you'd just been a member, what could you say? Well, here's an example. Officer Kappa Kappa fraternity, selected for fraternal judicial board, appointed peer advisor, and elected president. Improved community service and philanthropy, which led chapter to receive top Kappa Kappa chapter award and Alzheimer's Association top donor award. And this is real. This was someone, one of my clients. Except for, of course, I've changed some of the name of the fraternity, that sort of thing, to preserve confidentiality. So this is the sort of bullet you want in your resume to show what you've done. And here's some other examples. Collected, and these again, real examples. Collected thousands of soda tabs to help support mission of Ronald McDonald House. Helped to organize school-wide blood drive, exceeded prior year's goal by 25%. Gate guard, managed entrance to busy pools, recognized for welcoming attitude towards all. Eagle Scout and member of the Order of the Arrow, over 300 hours of community service in 4 states. Concert band section leader, performed in bi-semester concerts that were highly praised by the audience, instructed section on technique, style, and expression of the music to fit conductor's interpretation of the piece. These are not all the same person, but they're just samples of what you can use from your background to prove you will deliver. Any questions? Okay. So to summarize the third secret, it's all about having an outstanding sales package. You need to think like a hiring manager. You need to consistently answer the question, what's in it for me? Where me is the reader. Me is the employer. Me is the other person. Don't make your resume about you. I mean, technically, it's about you, but it's really about what you can do for the other person. Does that make sense? And let me pause for a second. Any questions so far about anything or observations or anything else that someone wants to bring up? If not, I will move on. We'll also have time at the end for additional Q&A. So the fourth secret is to network to the hidden job market. Do you try to push through the front door, or do you get escorted through the guest entrance? When you are applying directly to jobs, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this. I'm just saying there's a limit to how much time you should spend on it. When you apply through the front door, it's like I'm taking a sheet of paper, I'm slipping it under this locked door. I'm hoping the person on the other side is so impressed by what I've written that they unlock it and let me come in to be part of this big pool of people who are going to be interviewed. Where if I can create an internal advocate, if I can get escorted, they come and take me out of the line, take me through the side door, up in the elevator, not necessarily for an interview, but for a conversation that can lead to an interview. And I'll give you an example of this. When I started out to get my first actuarial role, I had a target company, Equitable, in Manhattan that I really wanted to work for. I was home on Christmas break because I went to school out on the West Coast. And I had arranged an interview for their actuarial student training program. I go in and I have a conversation with the guy who's in charge of the program for an hour, and then I'm sent on my way. Now, I know because I ended up at Equitable that I had been rejected. But the night before I went in for that interview, my parents were having a cocktail party. And one of our close family friends who I'd actually worked as a gopher, an errand boy for his firm the summer before, he said, what's going on? I said, well, I'm going in for an interview at Equitable tomorrow. He said, really? I'm going to write to my old friend, Carl Davies. And so Carl Davies was a senior vice president and actuary at Equitable. And so Walter wrote him a letter on my behalf. So 2 days after the interview, playing tennis with my dad, and I get a phone call. And it's that hiring manager at Equitable asking if I can come back in before I go back to California. I go back in, and now I get to interview with 3 different actuaries. I'm clearly taken very seriously. And I am convinced the only reason that happened was because the letter arrived in Carl Davies' mailbox, and he reached out to John Van Kuren and said, this guy is good. You should take a closer look at him. And John said, well, okay, we'll bring him back in. And then I ended up getting the offer. So that's what happens when you focus on building internal advocates. Think of it also this way. When you respond to an ad or something on Monster or Dice or Indeed or a company website posting, how many people know about that ad, that posting? Well, people have job bots. They're, pretty much anyone who is in the market for a job like that knows about it almost instantly. So how many applications are being received by the company? It varies all over the map, particularly according to how specialized it is. But particularly at the lower levels, at the entry levels, it's going to be in the hundreds normally. In fact, I was working with someone years ago who he had applied to it was internship program at Cisco. And he took the next step that I thought was very smart. He reached out to the HR people, found out which HR person was dealing with the internship program, talked to them about the program, and found out that there were 3,000 applications and that they couldn't find his. So they said, well, can you resubmit? So how many of those applications that are being received do you think are getting forwarded to a hiring manager for possible interviews? When I've talked to people in the HR field, and from my experience was a little unique that I insist on doing all the hiring myself. So HR supported me, but I would decide who I was going to interview. But in most places, it's the other way around. And they're typically sending 5, maybe 10 on to the hiring manager. Now, they may have others that they can send if the first pool doesn't work out. But their job is to screen things out, only send the best of the best. So if as few as 200 were sent in for the opening in the first place, and as many as 10 are forwarded to the hiring manager for possible interviews, what are the odds of yours being the one that gets through? It doesn't mean it can't happen. So that's why I say don't ignore this, but don't make this the main thing or the only thing you're doing just because of the odds. Now, there's a lot of controversy about statements about the hidden job market. But I was speaking at IEEE Smart Tech Conference, and someone put this slide up saying that 75 to 92% of jobs are filled through networking and referrals, and 70 to 75% are never advertised. And how do you even measure this sort of thing? But let's say 50% are not don't make it to a posting or get filled before they get posted. Well, that would mean that if you're only doing direct applications, you're missing out on 50% of the market. Or what about if they're only posted internally to the company and you're outside? So, and that's why they talk about the hidden job market. I mean, in my own experience, I have multiple times gotten jobs that either were not in existence or someone was already in them at the time. So they did not make it to a formal posting. I got them right away. So the key to secret number 4, networking in the hidden job market, is I would advocate limiting the internet direct application search process to no more than an hour of your time a day. If you're in a full-time search, spend most of your time doing or arranging one-on-one meetings, phone calls, Zoom sessions with people. Craft a strong message focused on the results you could achieve, the challenges you can overcome for the role that you want. Use those one-on-ones to hone your message and your stories. They're great practice. Think of them as interview practice. And they're more comfortable because they're networking meetings. They're not formal interviews. And sometimes they turn into an interview. I like you. I say, well, maybe there's a way to make this happen. Let's talk to you about that. And consider having a job search team that will help keep you motivated and accountable. Maybe it's a professor. Maybe it's a friend of the family who's well positioned. Maybe it's the career services person who you're working with. But that can help you move forward regularly. And I would, if you're full-time looking, I would target at least 5 one-on-ones per week. So the fifth secret to getting that first job you'll love is to avoid Q&A interviews. Now, does this scenario sound familiar for any of you who've had a job interview ever? There's a few minutes of small talk. Then you get to summarize your background. They say, tell me about yourself. Walk me through your resume, whatever. And then there's maybe 40 minutes of questions that you carefully answer. And then maybe 10 minutes at the end where they say, well, do you have any questions for me? It's a pretty standard scenario. And if you let that be your interview, you're not going to get the job most of the time because you're not doing anything that stands out. You're not showing leadership. You get to the end and I'm like, yeah, okay, Patrick, he had good answers to my questions. It seems like a nice kid, but I don't know if he can really have a conversation. I don't know how he's going to interact with other people. He didn't show any leadership or drive. So you need to break it up if you really want to be successful and have the best interviews. So you want to create a conversation. Now, how do you do that? Well, one technique is every second or third question you're asked, you can throw in your own related question. They say, well, tell me about how you used Excel to do something. And you give them a story about your expertise with pivot tables and how you did this. And then at the end, you say, look, can I ask, how extensively do you use Excel in your operation? So it's related to what we just talked about. So it doesn't feel like it's out of left field, but it gets the other person talking. And if you do that a few times, pretty soon you won't have to think about it anymore. It'll just become a conversation. Another really good way to do it, sometimes you'll get asked, tell me about your greatest strength. Okay, you could say, well, I am known for my communication skills. I have written extensively. I could go on and on about that. Or I could say, well, I would have to say my greatest strengths are my ability to do persuasive presentations, my facility in interacting and relating to people in different cultures, and my drive and ambition. Which would you like me to tell you about first? What I've just done is I've shown that I have multiple skills as opposed to just one. I've drawn the other person into the conversation, and by how they answer what they want to pursue, I'm getting some information about what's most important to them. Do not save your questions for the end of the interview. And you will be coached probably a lot of times on having a great zinger at the end of the interview that you can get this impress this hiring manager with. I'm going to advise you against that. Yeah, have the zinger. That's fine. But don't save it for the end because you think you're impressing me by asking me this really insightful question when we've got 5 minutes left. And I'm there saying, does Andrew even know this is a good question? Is he just trying to zing me? Is this some technique he's been taught? We would have had a great conversation 15 minutes ago if he'd brought this up. He must not realize how good a question it is. And so where you think you've impressed me by zinging me at the end, you've actually done exactly the reverse. I don't care as an interviewer if you have no questions left at the end, if you've had questions throughout, if you've asked me good questions, if we've really explored things. I'm not going to be bothered at all if you say, no, actually, the only question I have is, when do I start? Which actually someone I was working with tried that. He had a panel interview and it was going really well. And it got to the end. He said, well, when do I start? He started the next day. And ask questions that dig deeply into their goals, their challenges, their motivations, what's keeping them up at night? Why is this job open? What are they looking to accomplish with this job? What could get in the way? What makes it such a problem for them? It'll give you so much insight into what's going on. And you are talking about what is really important to them. So that is the place where you want to dig as deeply as you can, because that's where the hiring decision is going to be made. And practice, practice, practice. Find friends, find experts, go to the career services group to practice interviews. Use those networking meetings. Go, when you have a networking meeting with someone, say, hey, I'd love to practice the story I might tell to explain why this is my passion, and I'd love your honest opinion on it. Hey, could you drill me with a few questions? You don't want your interview for the job you really want to be your practice interview. So apply these 5 secrets to land that first job you'll love. Have a focused target, tell powerful stories, have an outstanding sales package, network in the hidden job market, and avoid Q&A interviews. And I have two things to tell you about. One is I do career tips every month, actually a couple times a month, expert advice on marketing yourself. So if you're interested in getting that, what I'll do is also send you, I created this series I call Building Influence. It's 1 email a day per business day for about 2 weeks. So if you sign up for career tips, I will send you that Building Influence series as well. You can just type tips in the chat box and I'll get your email address from Jess to send you that. And the other thing, I have a session coming up tomorrow. It's a free session. I call it Career Journeys, where I interview people on their career journeys, uncovering what are the keys to success? What trips and what are the tricks and traps you should avoid? So I'm interviewing a nationally recognized online strategist tomorrow, Paul Taubman. If you're interested, you can sign up at my website. There's a link on the homepage, or again, you can type in chat in the chat box. I can send you the link. But it's a free session at noon tomorrow. So that's what I wanted to share. And we can ask and see what questions people have. I see there's something in the chat box. Was that a question? Oh, love that suggestion. Thanks. So any questions that I haven't addressed?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
So I think you've definitely emphasized the importance of finding a way to that back door to get in, have an advocate on the inside. I'm in the process of moving to a new area where I don't have very many connections at all. I'm trying to work the alumni network of my university, but do you have any other tips of like how to find those contacts and how to get in that back door?
Well, how are you using the alumni network? Let's start there.
I'm fresh in my process. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm going through people starting with the university and then the area and then what sort of skills or interests or jobs they're in, industries they're in, and just trying to make connections at all.
Okay. And Ken would tell you you could do a lot of this on LinkedIn too. You can go to the school company page and find alumni in different areas and different types of jobs and reach out to them that way. My daughter, when she was looking for her first teaching job, we did something like that where we identified principals and superintendents in the New York area who went to Bucknell, where she graduated from. And we just wrote them a simple note. It wasn't, hey, I'm looking for a job, or help me find a job. It was, hey, we're both Bucknell graduates. I'm trying to find my first teaching job, and you know how difficult it is to land that first one. I'd love to get any advice you could give me. By the time we sent the 10th note, the first 2 had responded that they'd love to meet with her. And the first one she met with, he's like, wow, this was such a good idea. Now that I know you, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to recommend you. And within a few weeks, she had 2 job offers. So that is one really powerful way. Another is use your You could use your professors if they're in that related area. You could use family friends, like the family friend that I'd worked for the summer before. He was very happy to connect me in any way he could. The trick is that you're never trying to ask for a job. What you're doing is you're asking for advice. Hey, you're someone whose advice I'd really respect. Would you have time to chat with me for a few minutes about my search? You're trying to equip them to understand what you're looking for, but more importantly, why you'd be great for it. And let them opt in to help you to the degree that they are willing. And then try to get them to, connect you to someone else. Now you're going to a new area. Don't let yourself get too blocked in by the fact that they have to be in the new area. If I work for Google, Google has offices everywhere. So even though I'm in San Francisco, it's very likely I have connections to people in the Detroit, Michigan area. Or I have people, even if I'm not in a big corporation, I may have people that I grew up with, that I went to school with in other areas. So think about just engaging as many people as you can, and getting them to connect you to someone who's in the field that you're looking for, so you can get more information, so you can learn more about it. And you don't have to just use the alumni network. I mean, you can go on to LinkedIn, get connected to all of your friends who are on LinkedIn. Get connected to your professors, get connected to family friends. You want to have at least several hundred connections to really unlock the power of LinkedIn. And then start reaching out to those people too. I don't know, Ken, if you wanted to add anything to that list. Okay. What other questions?
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute.
Oh, I thought you were saying, oh, you did such a great job, I don't have anything else to add.
Actually was going to say that. I think you hit it all. I think the main point though is that don't ask for a job. If you're asking for a job, you probably won't get too far, not only with that person, but they're not going to introduce you to other people because they don't want you to bother people that way. But it's just a natural thing. When you are asking for advice, you'll get what you need from them.
Yeah, most people love to give advice. Plus, it makes them feel valued that you want their advice.
I just want to say I was so glad, Andrew, that you asked that question, because I think, as a consultant and being independent of a large organization, the big thing is, well, how do you get an inside connection? And I'm not a natural networker, so it's been very helpful to hear the strategy that John laid out and suggestions for how to get around that. But I think that's probably the stumbling block. How do you find out about that hidden job market? Right? So thanks.
And for anyone who considers themselves an introvert, a really good book is this one here, The Introvert's Edge to Networking by Matthew Pollard. I really liked the book. A lot of his message resonated with me. I mean, I grew up as an introverted math nerd. Now,
surely not as an actuary, you weren't introverted.
Yeah, I have a friend who runs a financial executive group, and every time I come to speak to his group, he introduces me and some variation of, and I have a special treat for you tonight, an actuary who can talk.
John, what's the author of that book again?
Matthew Pollard. He's written a few. This one is on networking. He's written one on sales. But I think it's a very powerful message.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
one other thing about networking, but it's also, I think, the same with the job search in general. Don't get discouraged if people don't respond to you or don't give you the time you want. It's nothing personal. A lot of times people are busy or they feel like, oh, I have nothing to offer. You could reach out more than once, as long as you don't stalk or harass these people, but just keep going because it only takes one or two people that are going to get you to where you want to get to.
Yeah, what I like to say to people, no, don't interpret no. No is just no answer. I mean, until you hear no answer is just no answer. When you hear no, okay, respect that. But just, until I get the actual answer, I keep following up. I had a friend I was coaching who he always interpreted. If I don't get an answer, they don't want to hear from me. And so he called me up one day and said, okay, I have to tell you this. I reached out to this guy. I didn't hear back. And you know me, that would have been it. But I heard this little gremlin on my shoulder saying, reach out again. So I reached out again. Still didn't hear from him. And today I said, okay, I'll reach out one more time. And this time, to my surprise, the guy answered the phone and said, I'm so glad you called because I think there's something we could do together. Can you meet with me today? So don't interpret no answer as anything other than no answer. I think there was something here in the chat box. Oh, yeah, suggestion. Ask for a 15-minute call versus a longer time period for an initial networking call. Yeah. I mean, my philosophy is ask for what you want, what you think will do the most good for you, but then back off quickly to what they are willing to give you. I mean, I think even if I have to drive an hour and a half, in person is going to be more powerful. So if I have the time, I'm going to try and do it in person. But if the person is more comfortable doing it by phone, I'm willing to do it by phone. If they'd rather do it by Zoom, I'm willing to do it by Zoom. I back to what they're willing to do, but I always ask for what I think will do me the most good initially. Any other questions?
John, I have a question. I'm curious to know what your opinion is on some of the options on Indeed, and I think LinkedIn has this option as well of doing the quick apply thing for different jobs where you have your information loaded into Indeed already, and some of the postings will allow you to just quick apply and click one button, shoot your information off. Obviously, I mean, it feels a bit impersonal in a way, but I'm curious to see what you think about it. Do you think it's never worth it, sometimes worth it? What are your thoughts?
Well, my thinking is when I'm actually applying to something, I want to give it my absolute best shot. So I want to customize everything to what's the wording in this particular job description? What are the issues for this particular company? So if quick apply is not going to let me personalize, then I'm going to avoid it. I think the people who would use it are the ones who are doing the scattershot of trying to hit a lot of possibilities. It might work, but it's probably not going to get you the best possibilities that way. So I think having it ready, loaded up and ready to go, that's fine. But then try to find a way to personalize it before letting it go through.
Yeah.
John, going back to I guess really your early slides about the three-legged stool and passion and skills and life goals, and you talked about passions, and I think I do think some people even struggle with saying, what am I passionate about? What do I want to do? Perspective. So where I'm going with that is the value of informational interviewing, which is akin to networking. The idea of reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, can I just learn more about what you do, how you do it, and so forth. Any comments about, do you suggest that to folks in your practice? Any comments about how someone might approach that? I've found both personally and with other people that it's a really valuable tool, the idea of just going out and learning more from someone about how they do their work, and it creates a natural networking opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. And the other benefit is when I'm asking you, hey, I'd love to find out what you do, and then what brought you to this company? What do you love about this company? What made you go into this field? You're showing a lot of interest in them, and that builds a good connection. But you also, as you're saying, you find out a lot. The more you do that, the more that's kind of like the feedback loop that I start to see, does this sound more interesting to me or does it sound less interesting to me? And how do I need to pivot to get to the thing that will be more interesting? So it's a great way to start to hone in. You will have the most success if you have a direction. There are tons of things I could do, but I try to hone into something that sounds interesting so that, I can have a more focused message, but I'll have my ears tuned to the person says, well, given your background, have you considered software engineering? And I'm like, well, no, let's talk about that. Tell me more about it. So I can do that tactically, even though it wasn't the direction I was there for. But I'll be more successful if I have a fairly focused message, fairly focused thing I am talking to the person about in that conversation. But yeah, I think informational interviews are a great way to start honing in on what it is you want. And you could also start out saying, if you really don't know, if you're really struggling to figure it out, you could start out with your informational interviewing to try to help you with that. I call up Rob and I say, Rob, you're someone whose advice I admire. I'm struggling to figure out what I want to do next. And I'd love to share with you what little I figured out, what's my background, my story, and get your advice and brainstorm with you. Would you be willing to do that? So I can make meetings be about that early on. And as I gather that advice from people, it'll help me start honing in. And I'll say, oh, boy, Rob mentioned this area. That actually sounds kind of interesting. Let me go find some people doing that and have conversations with them and see if that is a good direction for me.
I think Chris just put something in the chat, John, to take a look at.
Oh, can you share more about the engagement bio you mentioned earlier? Okay. Yeah, you know what a resume looks like. Well, there's more than one format, but the traditional resume is reverse chronological, telling where I've done things, what jobs I've had from what time to what time and what bullets within that. Now, I advocate having a summary at the top that gives the, 4, 5, 6 bullets that summarize what I bring to the table, so that the person doesn't have to figure it out and grab them right away. An alternate approach that sometimes, can be very effective if you've done a lot of different things is to actually organize it as a functional resume. You only do that if you need to, because people are used to seeing the reverse chronological and they're wondering, why are you sending me functional? But it can be very powerful. I've done those with some people with great effect. The engagement bio is where my focus, instead of the traditional just job bullets, what I'm doing is basically, in effect, having case studies, simple, examples of the things that I have done for clients, or they might be things that I've done outside of for clients, but that point to the things I want to consult on. So I have bullets that are focused on telling these, in 1 or 2 lines, these simple case studies of how I have helped people with the issues I want to consult on. I still, at the end, might have a simple chronological, summary, because they're going to be curious about where I worked and, what my background is, but I don't make that the focus. I make the focus on these simple case studies. So that's what I mean by the engagement bio.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.